The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
Yes. All right, everybody. Welcome to the third Yaron Brook Show in 3 days. All right. Hopefully all ready for another rock and rolling show. Music just cuts off there. There has to be a way to kind of phase it out nicely. That would be nice. All right. This is the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you all for being here. And today we're going to go over some news items. We're going to talk about the Israeli elections. We're going to talk about North Korea and Trump, Brexit maybe, the Senate vote. Senate is going to vote to reverse Trump's emergency statement, emergency at the southern border. We're being invaded. It's horrible. And, probably a few other items that should be fun. And anything, of course, that you want to talk about. So Superchat line is open. I am accepting dollars, anywhere from $2 to, there's no limit to what I'm willing to accept. Anything. If you want your question to be turned into a short video, guaranteed, make it a $20 question, and we guarantee, unless it's a stupid question, unless I don't have an answer, or unless I come across as terrible, one of those options. If everything's normal, we will guarantee to post it as a short video. So use your $20 wisely on the Super Chat feature on YouTube. All right, let's jump in and talk about. There's a lot to talk about. Let me just give a plug here before we jump in. Let me just one plug. Everybody now has an app, the Ayn Rand University app, which has all of Leonard's courses on it, many of Ayn Rand's talks, maybe all of them. Lots of other talks on it. So it's a app that has all the content that used to be on campus is now on an app that you can download to your iPhone or your Android phone. So, and it's really, really, really cool. So, download it, and now you can walk anyway. You can, put on headphones and listen to the best content in Objectivism. Best content in Objectivism is available, the Ayn Rand University app. Just like Prager University, now there is an Ayn Rand University, and you can download that app at any of the app stores. All right, Boaz is asking, can we ask Super Chat questions? Absolutely, and the more money, the better in the Super Chat. But yes, you can ask Super Chat questions, so utilize that feature. I wanted to start with with the discussion that hopefully is interesting to you, but a discussion of the Israeli elections. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has called for elections, and they will be held in April. So soon, about a month and a little bit away. And as always in Israel, this is the election that's most important in the history of Israel, and the country will die unless people vote the right way. It's always hysteria. It's always panic. It's always the same kind of attitude. But this is an election like every election. I don't think it's as important as some have been in Israel's past, but it just like in the U.S., it will dictate the path that Israel takes in the next few years. I want to talk about one particularly interesting phenomena in the Israeli elections that I think you'll find interesting, and then I'm going to jump in. And talk about the broader issues regarding the election. I think the interesting phenomena in the Israeli elections, and really, it's really been a trend, I'd say, over the last 20 years, but this election is particularly obvious and kind of brutal. And that is that there is no left in Israel. There is no leftist political party in Israel. It just doesn't exist. There are plenty of leftist economic policies, and those leftist economic policies and those leftist economic policies are adopted by everybody, just like in the United States, leftist economic policies are adopted by Republicans, particularly if their name is Bush or Trump. But there's no left-wing party. So, for example, no left-wing party that has any substance or any significance or has any chance of winning substantial electoral votes. The left is just dead in Israel. There's no AOC in Israel with a kind of a fan base. There's no Elizabeth Warren. There's no chance that the Labour Party in Israel is going to be successful, or any other left-wing party, explicitly left-wing party in Israel, is going to be successful. And this has been true for a long time. Now, you have to remember, Israel was a socialist country. Israel was very much a left-wing country. From its founding in 1948 until the elections of 1977, the Labour Party won every single election by big margins. And the labor unions in Israel were unbelievably powerful and influential. Labor unions used to be the largest employers in Israel. They used to own the means of production. The labor unions, not the government. Government owned plenty of the means of production. But the labor unions was a larger employer than the government itself. So the labor unions were both managers and employees. And since 1977, there's been the labor has won and lost, and it's interplayed with the Likud, which is the right-of-center political party in Israel. But basically, Benjamin Netanyahu has been prime minister for the last 10 years. In the 1980s, were dominated by the Likud. There have been a few episodes here and there where Labour has taken over the government. But basically, today, in particular, Labour is dead. There is no Labour Party of any meaning in Israel. And Israelis on the chat can correct me if they think I am wrong on this. And it's interesting to think about why. I mean, partially it's a consequence of the fact that the Israeli economy has done well under these right-of-center governments. In the past, some of these governments have actually deregulated and they've sold off government property and government ownership of the means of production. The labor unions have been reduced to a fraction of the power they used to have. They still have way, way too much power in Israel, but a fraction of what it used to be. Israel is far from a free economy. It's just much, 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 much freer than it used to be. Today, Israel is considered the developed country. It's not a developing country. It's not a second world country or a third world country as it was when I was growing up. It is a first world country. It is just like a European country. It has similar GDP per capita. It has economic growth that in the last 10 years, or last maybe 20 years even, far exceeds that of Europe or the United States. It's a growing economy. It's a high-tech haven. It's an amazing high-tech superpower. And that has something to do with it. While many Israelis yearn, and they often protest about this, yearn for the security, the risk, the lack of risk that socialism provided, they don't actually yearn for the poverty that socialism created. And they're pretty happy with the state of the Israeli economy, and to the extent that they do vote their pocketbook. And I know that in the past I've said they don't vote their pocketbook. I'll tell you in a minute what they do vote and why this is not the main issue. But it is true that as the Israeli economy has done well, and as it's not like the right-of-center party is rabidly capitalist or rabidly free market. It is not. We'll talk about a true free market political party, or as close to a true free market political party in Israel, in any way, that exists in Israel right now and is running in this parliament. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I think it's important to note that the economy is doing well, so Israelis have basically left it alone. But I think the bigger issue, and this I think is really interesting, the bigger issue of why there is no left anymore in Israel has to do with security and foreign policy. Every Israeli, almost every Israeli that you ask, say they want peace with the Palestinians. every Israeli, pretty much, or majority of Israelis when asked, are willing to compromise quite a bit in order to achieve peace with the Palestinians. But also, every single one of those same Israelis will tell you that the likelihood of such peace is close to zero. The likelihood that the Palestinians would abide by any agreement is close to zero. The likelihood that they would believe anything the Palestinians tell them is close to zero. So what has happened since the Second Intifada in 2000 to 2003-4 is that Israelis have become realistic with regard to the enemy, the Palestinians. Maybe there was some idealism still when Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip and gave it to the Palestinians. They thought, okay, maybe this will appease them. Maybe this will make them happy. Maybe this will bring a change. And no, it's made things much, much worse. So Israel today has no leftist political party really of any significance, because there is no political party in Israel today willing to run on a platform of significant compromise with the Palestinians, which is what has always identified the left relative to the right. So in Israel today, there's a center, and its economic policies are somewhat left. There is a right of center, whose economic policies are somewhat left. There is a further to the right on security issues, and there is an even further to the right, people who want to kick out all the Palestinians out of Israel and send them to Jordan or whatever. So there is a degrees of how firm they want to be. I mean, there's one political party, give them incredible credit, that says the Palestinians have to be defeated. This is a war, and until they're defeated, there cannot be any conversation. And some really good talking points on the Israeli right that are pretty good in that, and are a fairly free market. So there is some correlation, but not a direct correlation, between how tough they are and between economic policy. But the Israeli political map basically goes from what is typically considered the center, certainly on security issues, and to the almost nutty right of Jewish identity, Jewish nationalism, a religious identity, doing away with any separation between state and religion, which there's some separation today in Israel. They want to do away with it completely. So you've got that spectrum. There's no left. Again, fascinating. I don't know very many countries where that exists, although a lot of European countries you're seeing today, there's a populist right, and there's a mildly left of center political party, but there's nothing on the radical left. UK is an exception, where there's really no party on the right. There's a center-right moderate party called the Conservatives, and then there's the Labour Party, which is rabidly left under Corbyn. But everything is center in Europe today, with some noises on the right, I think primarily for the Islam issue. So the left is basically, in Israel, politically dead. Culturally, it's not. Culturally, it's still very powerful. Culturally, it still dominates the university. It still dominates the media. It's still down. But even there, so let me tell you about this, the guy who is supposedly the only guy in a long, long time who might actually be able to defeat Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think of Netanyahu in a little bit, but this guy, his name is, he's a general. He's the former head of the Israeli armed forces. His name is Gantz. He was a general, so General Gantz. So Gantz he's the one guy who's as popular, more popular than Netanyahu today after 10 years of Netanyahu being prime minister. And everybody thinks he might be the future prime minister. He might actually defeat Netanyahu in this coming election. And what does he stand for? Well, nobody really knows. He's not tough on security. He's kind of a middle of the roader, but he's clearly not left on security. But he's a middle of the roader. He presided over the Israeli armed forces when they basically did nothing. in the Gaza Strip. Now, look, I'm not saying there's no left. There's no left that is politically significant, that has any chance of winning. There's a political party called Meretz, which is very left, but it's meaningless. It's an insignificant political party for all intents and purposes. It's been around forever, and it's never had any real power, and it has no chance of having any real power. So this guy Gantz stands for nothing, and when it comes to economic policy, nobody knows what he believes. He's basically a nothing candidate. He stands for charisma. He stands for the anti-Netanyahu. He stands for nothing. For a general. I'm a general. I know how to defend Israel. And in Israel, the main thing people vote on, other than morality and making themselves feel good, is security. It's security. There's no question. Israelis are committed up to a point. They don't want to be radical. They don't want to be radical. They don't want to be tough. They don't want to actually go after them. But they stand for security. Somebody's asking about Moshe Feiglin and Zehut. I will talk about that, I promise. So General Gantz has a chance of beating Netanyahu, but he stands for zero, nothing. Middle of the road. His whole political stance. When people ask him about particular issues, he rambles on and stands for nothing. A typical so-called centrist. The other alternative, of course, is a Netanyahu victory. Now, Netanyahu is going to be indicted very soon for fraud, for corruption, for taking bribes. I'm not involved enough in Israeli politics to tell you if any of that is real or if it's just a witch hunt. It's really, really hard to tell. I suspect that it's real. I suspect Netanyahu has been a power-hungry nothing for a very long time. I've never liked Netanyahu. He gives a great speech in English, but nothing else. He's, again, a weakling. He's lost a couple of wars in Hamas and at least one war to Hezbollah. He's not tough on security in the way that I think one needs to be tough on security. And in terms of economics, he was pretty good when he was kind of Treasury Secretary. A lot of reforms were happening back then. A lot of liberalization of the economy happened back then. But as a prime minister, he has been worse than pathetic in his economic policies in terms of Israel. He hasn't done a huge amount of harm, but he hasn't done any good, really, in the last 10 years as prime minister. So we've got two major politicians. Both of them, in my view, very weak on security, even though the Israeli public views them as tough. I view them as weak. And both of them, middle of the road, nothings on economics. And again, what's winning is the middle of the road, nothing. This is where in Israel the left has gravitated towards. It's gravitated towards the center. It's disenchanted socialists, disenchanted leftists who don't quite believe in socialism anymore, who don't quite believe in peace at any price anymore, but don't really believe in anything as an alternative. And this is what happens to leftists. They become cynics. They become zeros. They become unbelieving in anything. And therefore they'll vote for any charismatic, middle of the road nobody. So I'm not going to make a prediction about the Israeli election. I have no clue. I have no clue what happens to Netanyahu if he gets actually prosecuted. I don't know whether he's going to have to step down. I don't know whether he's going to run for election. I think he's going to run. But Netanyahu is a power-hungry, power-lusting politician, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is corrupt as well. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising at all. There is one political party in Israel that is very free market. Now, it's not a perfect political party, and it's primarily not a perfect political party because its founder and the person who runs it is very religious. But he claims to be for separation of state from religion. He claims to up to a point, not really, up to a point. He claims to be for the separation of state from economics. And actually, if you look at his economic statements of the political party, it's called Zehut which means identity, and I will talk about why that is a bad thing. I've met him. I know him. I've met him. A lot of my friends know him. He claims to be, very, very pro-capitalist, and I have no reason to doubt it. He's probably the most pro-capitalist candidate running for political office in Israel right now, and probably the best in terms of economics since another political party in Israel, some 39 years ago. They ran in the 80 and I think 84 Israeli elections, called Atzmaut, Independence. That was a political party. It's the only political party in my history that I actually volunteered to work at. This was before I discovered there were any other objectivists in the world. I thought I was the only one. I'd read Ayn Rand. I was 20 years old, 19 years old in the 1980s election. I thought I was the only person in Israel who believed in free market. I certainly thought I was the only objectivist in the world. I didn't know Ayn Rand was still alive. Remember, these are the days before the internet. And I open up the Israeli newspaper one day, and there's a 4-page ad by this political party saying, we will abolish these ministries. We will separate state from economics. We will do these amazing things. We stand for capitalism and a free market. And I rubbed my eyes because this is Israel. This can't be. This is impossible. All you had in Israel in those days were nationalists and socialists. That was it. Nationalists on the one side, the Likud, and socialists on the other side. And that was it. And so I went to the offices, and suddenly I found myself among people who weren't objectivists, but they were Ayn Rand fans and real free marketers. And I met my first objectivists ever. And the rest, I guess, is history of my involvement in the Israeli objectivist movement and then the American objectivist movement. But I was there stuffing envelopes and licking stamps and doing stuff like that for this political party. Now, the political party never got enough votes to cross the threshold to actually get into parliament. So they ran. They had great candidates. I knew the candidates. I still know some of them. The number 2, Moti Heinrich, still shows up to some of my events, some of our events in Israel, and it's still fun to say hello and to reminisce. But they never made it into parliament. And the fear, of course, with this party, Zehut, is that the same thing would happen to them. The difference is that Atzmaut, the political party in the 1980s, was clearly secular, was unequivocally secular. It was run by atheists, unequivocally atheists who were secular Israelis. Maybe that's what made it hard to win. Feiglin, who is running the Zehut Party, is clearly a religionist. Again, he claims to be for separation of state from religion, but he also chose as his name for his political party Zehut, which is identity. Now, what is that identity? Well, that identity is as a Jew, and that identity, I think, is as a religious Jew. So I worry about that. Now, if I was in Israel, I'd probably still vote for him because of his stated commitment to separation. I take him at his word. I have met with him. I've sat down with him. I spent a couple of hours with him in California. He came by. He visited me, and we talked. And he's definitely an impressive guy, and he's definitely charismatic. And if anybody has a chance to bring a free market ideas to Israel, maybe it's him, and maybe he has a chance of getting into parliament. What's cool about this political party is the number 5 on the list. You see, in Israel, you run the party, and people vote for the party, or at least it's some combination of people and party. And if you get enough votes, you get certain mandates. You get a number of people in. Somebody says that Feiglin, this political party, Zehut, is going to get 9 mandates, 9 seats in the parliament. If they did, that would be huge. That would be huge. That would be like, a free market party in the United States getting 15% of the vote. I mean, 9 mandates is massive. I think it's 120 seats. 120 seats, that's almost 10% of the vote. I mean, that is hard for me to believe. But that would be really, 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 really cool if they got 9 mandates. The cool part is that the number 5 on the list is a really, really good friend of mine, somebody who's been a friend of mine since the mid-90s. Her name is Libby Molad, and Libby is number 5. And one of the reasons that I am positive about this party, and one of the reasons I would vote for the party, is because I trust Libby. I trust Libby to keep them on the right path, that even if there are temptations within the political party to move in a nationalist or in a religious direction, or to compromise on economic issues or other issues of personal liberty, Libby would straighten them out. Libby's an objectivist, has been an objectivist she's the only objectivist. I mean, there have been objectivists who've run in the United States, but I think Libby probably is the first objectivist to run for national office with a chance of actually getting in, of an actual chance to get in. So if they get 8 to 9 mandates, which would be huge, then Libby is going to be a member of the Israeli parliament, which is going to be really, really funny and fun and terrific. I get to go visit her in her chambers at the Israeli Knesset. I mean, it would be a blast. Libby's been involved in objectivism again since the mid-90s, and I've hung out with her for many, many, many hours over the years, and she's great, and she's fabulous. So, let's hope that they don't blow it. Let's hope that they run a good campaign. Let's hope that they really push this agenda. One of the good things about this political party is that they're the only political party, I think, in Israel running to legalize marijuana, and it could be that just on that they get enough mandates to get in, to get into the parliament, just on the legalization of pot. Israel's very pro-pot, so that should be cool. So if you're in Israel, if you're an Israeli, I don't usually endorse political parties. I don't usually make recommendations. I'm going to make a recommendation to vote for Zehut with some trepidation about the fact that Feiglin wears a yarmulke. He's like a Ben Shapiro, but he's better than Ben Shapiro. On the issues, he's better than Ben Shapiro. And I would vote for Ben Shapiro in the United States relative to certainly Donald Trump and many of the other alternatives for it. So I never endorse, but here I'm gonna put my name behind Zehut. I hope you guys in Israel actually vote for them. I hope they get in. I hope Libby becomes a member of the Knesset. I think if Boaz Arad, who you all know, or many of you know, runs the Ayn Rand Center Israel, I think if he wanted to go into politics, he would have probably been also a member of this list and being maybe as high as Libby, maybe even higher than Libby. It's hard to tell. Boaz is very well known among kind of the liberty circle in Israel. And it's going to be very exciting. And look, none of this would be possible. None of this would be possible without Ayn Rand in Israeli culture all these years. And Ayn Rand has been a significant presence in Israeli culture since the 1970s. She was very well read. People read her in the 60s and 70s, particularly in the 70s. There was a well-known philosopher at Tel Aviv University in the 1970s teaching Ayn Rand, although he went crazy later on. In the 1980s, Boaz, myself, and some others were very, very active in the objectivist movement in Israel. The books have always been in print. Atlas Shrugged, The Fountain have always been in print. Capitalism, Not Known Idealism has been translated into Hebrew, but Ayn Rand has always been there to a large extent because of Boaz's influence over the last 10 years. And, we run the Atlas Shrugged Prize for Best Startup in Israel that gets massive press. So the ideas of free market, the ideas of objectivism, the ideas of individual liberty, individual freedom have always been a part, or not always, since the 1970s, have been a part of Israeli culture, at the margin, right? Always marginal, but growing. And maybe some of those have grown now enough to put a political party into power. By the way, they're very good on foreign policy as well. So on security issues, they're very good. They understand that any compromise with the Palestinians is death to Israel, that Israel must defeat the Palestinian threat threat, and only then can it be successful. Okay, I'm just looking over the Super Chat question to see if there's any Israel-related questions. There's one, so I'll take that one, and then I'll go by the order in which they were asked. But that's a thing on Israel. If you want to ask questions about Israeli politics or Israeli culture, what's going on in Israel, feel free to ask me. So what are my thoughts on Rabbi Meir Kahane and the JDL? I mean, I've always been very, very negative on Rabbi Meir Kahane. Kahane was a real nationalist. He wanted to deport all non-Jews, all Palestinians from Israel. He wanted basically to treat, as I understand it, Israeli Arabs as second-class citizens. He was a nutcase and a rabid religionist, so somebody who believed that there should never be a separation of church, and state. I have no idea what his economic positions were, but it didn't matter because he wanted to make Israel into much more of a theocracy. And it was very, very dangerous. He was ultimately assassinated in New York by an Islamic terrorist, I think a Palestinian, but I can't remember. But I'm very much opposed to Kahane. I'm opposed to the political party that still represents his views that actually Netanyahu just got to deal with. Netanyahu, one of the things most sickening about Netanyahu is that while Netanyahu is himself a secularist, he has forever granted huge political power, huge political leverage to the ultra-Orthodox, ultra-religious political parties in Israel. It's one of the things why I despise Netanyahu, why I would never vote for Netanyahu. I would vote for one of the smaller political parties in Israel, and in this case, I would vote for Zehut. But no, I think Kahane was terrible, really, really, really bad, very, very dangerous, a little crazy. If you watched him speak, a little crazy. Does Israel have laws governing individual ownership of guns? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the laws are. I'm sure they do have laws, and I'm sure you certainly can't own anything. I've never seen a gun store in Israel, although they might be, but I've never seen a gun store in Israel. Israelis typically have guns in their homes that are related to their reserve duty. So if you're in reserves, then you have a gun issued to you by the Israeli military, and you typically keep it at home. I mean, there was always a gun in the closet in our house because my father was always ready to jump and go to war, and indeed he did on two occasions, 1967 and 1973. In 67, he got on a plane because we were living in England and went to war, and in 1973 he just was called up and he left, and no cell phones, nothing. We didn't see him for days, weeks, and it pretty scary stuff. But he took the gun that he has in the closet in 73 and he left. And that's what you did if you were in reserve duty. I used to bring my gun home when I went on weekends away from the military base. So you'd always carry your gun home. That's why you see so many Israelis in uniform carrying guns. You also see civilian carrying guns, but I guess they have licenses. But it's not clear to me what exactly the laws are, and so on. I carried a gun, war gun. That was weird. I carried a gun when I was 17, and I used to be in Scouts in Israel. It's not Boy Scouts. It's just Scouts, boys and girls mixed together. And we used to go hiking. I used to be a troop leader. Used to have about 40, 50 kids, boys and girls. And I was 17, I think they were 14. And we used to go hiking in the Golan Heights. We used to go hiking in the Negev, in the Galilee. I don't remember taking them to the Negev, but that's also possible. And this is in the north of Israel. And this is an era where there was a lot of terrorism. And in America, nobody would be allowed to go hiking. There would be a ban on hiking because Americans are so risk averse that, there's terrorism, there's crime, we build a wall. Anyway, I had to bring in the wall. There was a lot of terrorism in Israel at the time. And so as a 17-year-old, I would go and there would be this like armory, and I can't remember who ran the armory. I think the Scouts did. And I would check out a rifle. It wasn't a very sophisticated rifle. It was a single-shot rifle. And I would check out the rifle, and maybe two other 17-year-olds would be with me on this hike. And we take 50 14-year-olds and 3 like 17-year-olds with rifles slung on our shoulders, and we would go hiking. And I don't know what we would have done if we'd encountered terrorists. I have no idea if any of us were any good shots. We all in high school were trained to use a single bolt rifle. But that was just the culture. It was no big deal. Never really thought about it. We didn't walk around with the rifles armed. We armed them afterwards. It's it is what it is. So that's how we lived. And so there was no big deal about it. But I don't know what the actual gun laws are in Israel. Like next time I'm in Israel, I'll ask and I'll get back to you guys. Michael asks, so why are Americans so fake and superficial compared to Europeans, Canadians, and Israelis? This is based on my comments from yesterday, I guess, or Ayn Rand's comments about America not having a culture. I mean, I wouldn't call Americans fake and superficial because I don't think they are. I think Americans tend to be relatively ignorant of history, ignorant of geography, ignorant of world events. I think Americans know almost nothing about the world. It's quite stunning how ignorant Americans are about the world. That's why lately you can rile them up with fear-mongering because they just don't know. Americans have very little culture, but I don't think they're superficial and fake. I think they're very American. I think they're very genuine. They're very real. They're very honest. Americans are incredibly hardworking. Americans are incredibly innovative and driven and risk takers and entrepreneurial. At least they were. But they're not cultured in the same way as Europeans, Canadians, and even Israelis are. And I think a lot of that is because Americans have never taken intellectuals seriously. And this has been, and Ayn Rand writes about this has been a major virtue of Americans. They have not taken their intellectuals seriously. They've not taken philosophy too seriously. It's been on the periphery. They don't trust intellectuals. They think they're fake. They think they're elitist. They think they're full of it. They think they're detached from reality. Americans are much more connected to reality. This is what Ayn Rand called the American sense of life, is that feeling of optimism and strength and entrepreneurship and risk-taking and willingness to do stuff and not just sit and wait, that I think, unfortunately, is slowly disappearing from America, but that characterized America forever. But it is that they're ignoring the intellectuals are telling them, no, the world is dark, everything is pessimistic. You can't achieve, you can't be successful. There's no point in taking risks. The government should take care of you. They've always rejected the intellectuals, and they rejected with it the whole culture of the intellectuals, and part of the culture of intellectuals, there's sometimes good things. I mean, opera, good artwork, and a lot of other things that intellectuals respect and admire. Americans have just rejected it because they've thrown the baby out. Well, they've thrown the bathwater out with parts of with I guess the baby. But that has been a virtue because the intellectuals are so bad. The problem is, and this is why I think America has been on the descent and continues to be on the descent, is that they haven't found intellectuals to replace the bad ones. And at the end of the day, philosophy wins. At the end of the day, only philosophy wins. At the end of the day, the intellectuals dictate the culture. At the end of the day, you cannot ignore the intellectuals. They seep in. Maybe it's through the movies. Maybe it's through popular songs. Maybe it's through political candidates. Maybe it's through the political culture. But they seep in. Certainly it's through the universities. So at the end of the day, the intellectuals must and do win. So the only way Americans can keep that positive sense of life, the only way the Americans can keep everything that is good about being an American, is to have real American intellectuals. But the only real American intellectual is Ayn Rand. I mean, of a scale, of a substance, of a real power. And the people who follow her, and some people at the periphery who are good but just not great. But you need to have an alternative to the rotten intellectuals. This is the thing about Trump and the whole idea, yeah, we hate the elites, we want to crush the elites. But you need elites, in a sense that you need intellectuals. Who are you going to replace them with? No answer. No answer. Who is going to guide the decision-making, the policy-making, the political policy-making, but the culture? Oh, you need intellectuals to do that. And yeah, the goal should be to replace the elites. The goal should be to replace the intellectuals, but with whom? And until America embraces liberty, freedom, individualism, and embraces intellectuals that advocate for individualism, and until those intellectuals become prominent, until, I don't know, this sounds arrogant, but until I'm bigger than Rush Limbaugh, bigger than Ben Shapiro, bigger than Glenn Beck, then America's finished. Now, I don't think I'll ever be, I don't know why I wear these headphones. I don't think I'll ever be that big, but that's partially why I don't think America is going in the right direction. It's partially why I think America cannot be, in my lifetime, the beacon of success, the beacon of prosperity, the beacon of liberty that it deserves and should be. And why it can't ultimately get the kind of culture that it deserves. Because intellectuals like me, philosophers like Ankagate or Greg Solomeri, when they become big, when they become household names like some of the philosophers like Peter Singer is today, or like, not household names, but names in the culture, people who are significant in the culture, yeah, then you'll know. When people are citing Ayn Rand instead of citing John Rawls, then you'll know that we're heading in the right direction and that there is a future for America. But again, intellectuals win. If our intellectuals are marginalized, American culture cannot win. That's the bottom line. And that's why you should be sharing. You should download that Ayn Rand Institute University app with all that fantastic content. You should tell your friends. You should educate yourself. And then go educate everybody you know about these great ideas. Michael asks, why are many people rational in the context of their careers but completely irrational in their personal lives and politics? Why are most people second-handed and evade reality? I mean, there's no answer, to a large extent, there's no answer to the second part. Why are people second-hand and evade reality? I don't know. There is no answer. But I can tell you this, that our educational system doesn't explain it completely, but it certainly supports it. When education is boring, when education doesn't motivate, doesn't excite, doesn't stimulate, doesn't encourage to look at reality, when the education is slanted towards a particular philosophical agenda, when the education on the one hand tells you that there is no such thing as reality, but on the other hand tells you you better memorize 2 times 2 is 4. Just the wiring gets all screwed up. People get all messed up. And it's easier to evade. It's easier to drift because it's hard to make sense of the garbage that is being thrown at you. Now, why are people more rational in the context of their careers? And they're not completely rational, and not everybody is rational in the context of their careers. But I think the reason they are is that the feedback mechanism is more direct. They get rewarded and punished more directly. So you screw up in your job, you fired. In America still. So people are not rational as Americans are in France, let's say. Because in France it doesn't matter. You can screw up and nothing happens because they can't fire you. It's very, very difficult to fire you. So one of the most important laws out there, one of the most important abilities out there is a flexible labor market, because labor markets educate people about reality. They force people to live up to reality. I talk about this in my talk on rational optimism, the role of business in America in inculcating a reality-based ideas into their employees. You have no choice. You make the sale or you don't make the sale. You write the piece of code or you don't write the piece of code. The code works or it doesn't work. A is A. That's business. And what sustains America, what sustains American business, what sustains American culture to the extent there's a culture, what sustains the American sense of life is business. Business. This is why the attacks on business are so undermining, so vicious, so horrible to what it means to be American and what it means to have a future as American. So people in their jobs get instant feedback. They don't get instant feedback in their personal lives. You play games, and emotions play a lot more role, and people don't know how to deal with those emotions in their games, and they don't get that A is A, black and white. And the same in politics. It's not clear. Was Bush a better president than Clinton? The Republicans are always better than Democrats. The Democrats sometimes better than Republicans. Is divided government better than owning? Is capitalism better than socialism? Well, maybe the mixed economy is better than both of them, which is what most people think. Most people don't believe in socialism. Most people believe the mixed economy. They want freedom. I mean, Elizabeth Warren will tell you, we want capitalism. Yay, capitalism. We just want to control it. We want to do away with its excesses, and we want to give a safety net to those who can't. So, and the same in their personal lives. They're a mixture of emotion and reason. And I think what saves them in their work life is the instant reward and instant punishment that business provides. The need to deal with reality. What is that line Ben Shapiro stole from somebody, but it's a good line. Reality doesn't care about your feelings. That's very true in business. Your customer doesn't care about your feelings. Your suppliers don't care about your feelings. Suppliers want to get paid. Your customer wants a great product at a good price. Okay, Abtin asks, you've moved around a lot during career. Has that caused conflict in relationships, especially with your spouse? How have you dealt with it? I've been lucky. No, it hasn't caused conflicts in my relationship with my wife. My wife's been amazing in that regard. But we have a great relationship and always have had a great relationship. I mean, when we were dating in Israel, right, while we were in the army, I said to her, one day I want to move to America. And her response was like, when do we leave? And this is a woman who had never been out of Israel, never been on an airplane. The first time she was ever on an airplane was she was 24 years old, right? Never been out of Israel. That was the first trip out of Israel, was when she was 24. And she knew she wanted to go. She knew she wanted to have an adventure. She wanted life to be meaningful. She wasn't going to be cooped up in a little place. And then, we just made it everywhere, and we grew up together, and it was obvious that we had to move when we had to move. And many occasions when I was, down on the progress we were making, spreading objectivism, on the progress of success, I would say, I should just go back to my finance world. I should just go back and make a lot of money, right? And I could have. I've said in some of my talks, I've said, I've literally walked away from millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to do what I do. And she would always say, you're not going to be happy. What's the money worth if you're not happy? Wow. I mean, how many spouses say that? And my wife has never worked for a living. She's never earned a wage, right? So she's worked, raising a family, keeping the house, being an artist, but she's never made money. And yet, she did not urge me to go over the highest monetary payoff, which is evolutionary psychology would tell you that that's what women want. Women want money, lots of money. No. And she's been willing to move, to take risks, and now move to Puerto Rico, which is a big risk. Now this is also benefits us financially, but it's not easy to move to Puerto Rico. I travel around the world all the time. I travel everywhere. To be in Puerto Rico 6, 7, 8 months a year is not simple. It's not easy. So I don't know. I've in that sense I've been lucky. I can't think. I mean, my kids, I'm sure, did enjoy the moves, but there weren't that many of them. Nowhere near as many as I had when I was a kid. I had big moves when I was a kid. So I had to lose friends, make friends, lose friends, make friends all the time. I survived it. I hated it, but I survived it. My kids seemed to be fine when they did it, but with my wife, I've never had a problem. And what other relationship is there? Kids, they do what you tell them. when they're kids. And I have no other relationships that matter to that extent. I have friends who I've left, but we stay in touch and we stay friends. And they don't have a claim. Nobody has a claim against my life or my wife in my life. All right, Jason Fisher. Why are movies getting worse and TV shows getting better? I think because it's harder to tell a story in a movie effectively, dramatically, because it's so short. I think longer is easier. I think you need to be really brilliant to be able to make a story that is really, really short, that has immense meaning visually and in every respect that the movie works. And I think you can see with the rise of superheroes that Hollywood just wants to make, the same story over and over again. There's no imagination, there's no creativity. All of that is being driven out, and partially it's our fault because those are the movies we, not me particularly, but we generally, we actually buy tickets to, and we reward Hollywood for doing that. So they keep doing it as long as we reward it. So you have to so movies cost a lot of money. Maybe this is part of it. Movies cost a lot of money, so you have to make a lot of money. You can make small independent movies, and that's fine. And once in a while, small independent movies come out, and they're really good. Remember Whiplash, which was really good, and it was small, and it made a lot of money for them. But TV is cheaper. TV, you can flesh out a story. Writers can write, and they don't have to worry about having everything integrated in the same extent as a movie. A movie, everything has to be integrated in an hour and a half, 2 hours. The plot, the cinema, I think TV can be less focused on the visual. TV can be a little bit disjointed. You can see that in how disjointed what is any of these shows, any of the really good shows, even the good shows, are disjointed. They don't have to. Every episode is not brilliant. Overall, they're good, but every episode is not brilliant. I can't think of a show where every episode was brilliant. But also remember that most of the good TV shows are very dark, very unheroic. They do well, but they don't get the kind of viewership that a superhero movie does. And they're good, but within that context of darkness and negativity and there's no romanticism. There's very little romanticism in TV. Are there free market parties in Hong Kong? I don't know. In Hong Kong, there's no real politics because under the British there were no elections, and under the Chinese there are no real elections, no real political parties. There's no real voting. So I don't know that they're free market political parties. And I don't think it's relevant because Chinese politics is not a democracy in that sense. All right, is there anything positive you see happening in the next 10 years, or is it all negativity and decline? Well, I mean, the positive is that I think that the people who are rational, I think that the people who have good ideas. I think that, the people who are advocates for Ayn Rand's ideas, objectivism, but more broadly people with pro-free market ideas, I think over the next 10 years are going to make significant, major strides forward. I think they're going to become bigger parts of the culture. I think they're going to become more and more a force that has to be reckoned with, even if still a marginal force that can win election. So I think on the grand scale, things that continue to deteriorate. I don't see anything net positive happening on the big political scale, either here or in Europe in the next 10 years. And on the more micro scale, on the scale of us, on the scale of those of us who believe in freedom, those of us who believe in liberty, I think we grow and we become the real alternative to the intellectual left, because I think there is no intellectual right anymore. Conservatives have sold out to Trump. They become anti-intellectual. The few never Trump conservative intellectuals are struggling because nobody's paying attention to them. And I think those of us who believe in real free markets, those of us who believe in real freedom, those of us who believe in a individualistic versus a collectivistic political viewpoint, we have a real opening to make a stand. Now, I don't think we have political power for many, many decades, but I do think we have a chance over the next 10 years to really stand out, make our voices heard, start having an impact, start seeing positive impacts. Maybe in the next 10 years I'll have 100,000 followers, or 1 million. And, I'm just extrapolating from me as an example of the dozens of intellectuals that I think we're going to have over the next 10 years who are going to be advocates for individualism as compared to the collectivism of both political parties. Both political parties. Somebody says Game of Thrones, every episode is brilliant. No, it's not. There's some episodes of Game of Thrones that are truly brilliant. I'd say season 5 is amazing, almost in its entirety. But there are episodes that are like, no, they didn't just do that. There are episodes that are like, this is just stupid. And then there are episodes that are like a little boring. And in the beginning, the first 3 seasons, it was impossible to tell what was going on because there were too many characters. So no, Game of Thrones is not a perfect series. It's not a perfect show. It's not true that every episode is genius. Season 6 was rushed, or season 7, or whatever the season is, the last season was rushed. And I think the next season is going to be super rushed. So I doubt that every episode is going to be great. Okay, Avid Film Buff writes, many anarcho-capitalists and syndicalists point to Catalonia during the Civil War as a success story. How would you respond to that? I have no knowledge of what happened in Catalonia during the Spanish Civil War. Sorry. But I'm sure it was an anarcho-communist or syndicalist. And I'm sure it wouldn't survive more than a little period of time. Sure, even the kibbutz survived for a while, and then it all collapsed. Sometimes it takes reality a while to catch up with the idiocy of people. Oh my God, there's so many, I'm glad you're asking Superchat questions, but I'm going to be here all night. Okay, yes, I did that one. What is your opinion on banning of Tommy Robinson's books by Amazon and other sellers? I haven't even heard of that. I didn't hear that his books were banned. I mean, that's horrific. That's horrible. It's culturally a really negative sign. There's nothing much to do about it except complain and write to Amazon about it. I think Amazon sells Mein Kampf. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. But certainly it sells Das Kapital. And I'm sure it sells some really awful books from left and right throughout. But banning Tommy Robinson is just stupid and wrong on every account. I mean, his books might be bad. I don't know. I don't know anything about his books. I don't particularly like Tommy Robinson. I've talked about him in the past, but I don't think he's evil on the scale of many of the people. I'm sure they have Che Guevara books there. Che Guevara literally killed little kids. Little kids. Right? Right. Why are you asking a question when right below it you say I'm talking nonsense and I sound like a leftist professor more and more? Why do you care what I think, Jason? It just boggles my mind. If I thought that of somebody, I would stop listening, or I certainly wouldn't get engaged in chats and in asking questions. I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd. All right, but this is the world we live in. This is this amazing culture that we live in, where people do stuff like this. Do you believe that the classical education movement can have a positive impact on our culture, and if it were to gain popularity? Yeah, I mean, I think any attempt to improve the educational system is going to have major impacts on the culture. By the way, this issue about America not having a culture is straight out of Ayn Rand. That's what she wrote. She said America has no culture, no first-handed culture, no original culture. The culture that America has, it imported from Europe. But that's Ayn Rand. So I guess Ayn Rand was talking nonsense. So classical education is one form of education. I'm not a huge proponent of classical education because I think there's better education, but I think there's a lot of good work being done in education by a number of different entrepreneurs and all over the place entrepreneurs. This is probably the most optimistic I can get is about the future of education because there's so much good work being done on developing science and math curriculum, by developing whole educational systems around Montessori and whole curricula around other things, schools run by objectivists. It truly is amazing what's happened in the last 10 years, and I can only imagine what's going to happen in the next 10 years in terms of a better, significantly better education. So, and that, of course, is what will change the world ultimately. That is, we need educational entrepreneurs. We need better curriculum. We need better educators. We need kids to learn how to think and to learn facts and to have knowledge and to be able to apply that knowledge. And only then will we be able to have a true renaissance and be able to have a true return to ideas and to the ideas of freedom and the ideas of the Founding Fathers. You can't get that with progressive education. You cannot get that with the kind of education system we have today in the world. So having an educational revolution, including classical education, which is better than the modern educational systems, is massive. It cannot be underestimated. Maybe the most important thing happening in the world today. All right, why does happiness require that we put reason above faith? How do you respond to the assertion that religious people can be extremely happy? So I think you have to put reason above faith in order to be happy. Why? Because happiness is the state of consciousness one attains from achieving one's goals. The only way to achieve one's goals, I mean meaningful goals, real goals, pro-human life goals, is to adhere to reality and adhere to reason. Faith, by definition, undercuts those goals. It tells you don't think, pray, don't think, emote, don't think, follow orders. But following orders does not get you values. Following orders does not provide you with the satisfaction of gaining those values through your own effort. Mindlessness, which is what faith is at the end of the day, is not a strategy for achieving success in anything, and success is required for happiness. Now, why can religious people be happy? Religious people can be happy to the extent that they're not religious. To the extent that they don't take their religion seriously, which I think is true of most religious Americans. They don't take religion seriously. So they don't practice it fully. They don't practice it consistently. They don't apply faith to the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis. They go to church on Sunday, and they kind of say the right things, and they kind of pretend to believe, and maybe they pray before they go to sleep or whatever, or before they have a meal. But they don't take it seriously. They don't actually embed faith into their decision-making mechanisms. And therefore, to the extent that they practice reason in the other parts of their life, they can be happy. To the extent they don't, they won't be. So if they go into a career based on faith, and they pray instead of working hard for a raise, or they pray instead of working hard for an innovation, to achieve an innovation, or they do a startup and they think that they'll just go with it. They'll just go based on faith that things will work out. Then they're not going to be successful and they're not going to be happy. But if they practice reason in their career, and they practice reason in the startup, and they practice reason when they deal with the facts of reality, and they practice reason in their relationship with their spouse, and yeah, once in a while they give the Santa Claus and a tooth fairy they do, then yeah, they can be happy again to the extent that they are rational. So to the extent that they take their faith seriously, to the extent that they believe that the meek shall inherit the earth, that it's harder for a rich man to go through an eye of a needle it's harder for a rich man to go into heaven than a camel to go through an eye of a needle, or anything. It doesn't matter. You pick the biblical statement. To the extent that they take those seriously, to the extent that they practice the 10 Commandments because they're 10 Commandments, not because they make sense to them, to that extent they won't be happy. Most people practice reason in much of their day-to-day life. Most people can be happy to an extent. I think the more consistent you are in practicing reason, the better off you are. So in whatever aspect of your life you have faith, to that extent, you will cripple your ability to be happy. I know a lot of Christian businessmen who are generally happy, generally have done good in their lives, generally lived a good, rational life, have produced, have created, have built, have successful families, have wonderful spouses and everything like that. And yet, when they go older, they feel guilty. They feel guilty because of their religion, not because of anything they've done. To the extent that you feel guilty, to the extent that you have unearned guilt, to that extent you can't be happy. It holds you back. To the extent that you believe pleasure is a bad thing. I mean, a lot of things, a lot of little things that religion or faith embeds in you that if you don't reject, it just drags you backwards. It keeps you from being truly happy. Would you consider debating Jared Taylor, who is the most significant intellectual in closed borders ethno-state, or debating Vox Day, an economist on YouTube who has great arguments against free trade? No, absolutely not. So let me just state this. There are no great arguments against free trade. Zero, zilch, they don't exist. Not economic arguments. You can make nationalist argument. Maybe you can make national security arguments. But there are zero, zilch, good argument on free trade. But I won't debate racists. I won't debate a racist. Anybody who advocates for an ethno-state is a racist. Anybody who advocates for an ethno-state, particularly in America, of all places in the world, is beyond despicable. It is as Ayn Rand said, racism is the most primitive of all collectivist ideologies. I won't debate Noam Chomsky on the left, and I will not debate the ethno-state racists of the right. And there is no such thing as a good argument against free trade. There is only an evasive arguments about free trade. And what's the point? For the free trade argument, there is nothing there. There just isn't an argument about it. So anybody who advocates it, who calls himself an economist, is just an idiot, and there's nothing to talk to him about. All right. So here's another one who's willing to pay me $5, but he thinks I'm an idiot. You guys hate on conspiracy, yet proof of them exists. You're not objective. Well, what do you mean by conspiracy? Which conspiracy theories? What do you mean by conspiracy? There is no proof or evidence that there was a conspiracy behind 9/11. But there was a conspiracy behind 9/11. Conspiracy of bin Laden and the Islamists. So what do you mean by conspiracy? Of course, there are all kinds of conspiracies. I mean, did Nixon conspire to undermine the Democratic Party by breaking into their offices and stealing stuff? Yeah, that was a conspiracy. And it was a real conspiracy. The thing we hate on conspiracy theories are the nutty conspiracy theories. The what's his name? Alex Jones conspiracy theories. The birthists conspiracy theories. The stupid, silly Elders of Zion, Bilderbergs, Rothschilds controlling the world, nutty, stupid conspiracy theories. Now, there are people who control the world. There is a group that actually controls the world. They're called intellectuals. They're called university professors. They control the world by controlling ideas and by having the intellectual high ground that we all have to relate to. They control the world in that sense. But what does conspiracy mean? If you're talking about the nutty ones, yeah, we don't believe in conspiracy theories. When I say conspiracy theories, I'm talking about the nutty ones. I'm not talking about the fact that there are conspiracies out there. I mean, was there a conspiracy that between Trump and Cohen to bribe a porn actress not to spill the beans on Trump? Yeah, that was a conspiracy. But, and there are lots of conspiracies. The biggest one being, but it's not a conspiracy in the sense that you mean that people get together in a dark room and think about, the intellectuals control the world. But they're not doing it consciously, coordinatedly. George Soros is not pulling some weird strings. He's funding a lot of these intellectuals. But it's not some cabal sitting around dictating what will happen in the world. It is bad ideas governing the bad state of the world. What do you mean you have no theory why most people are second-handed? Why aren't you second-handed? There must be a reason. Well, the reason I'm not second-handed is I chose to not be second-handed. The reason people are second-handed is because they chose not to think for themselves. So the fundamental choice that we have, Ayn Rand's theory of free will, basically is that some people choose to think, choose to focus, choose to orient their mind towards reality, and other people don't. And if you don't orient your mind towards reality, then the only other place you can orient your mind towards is other people, because you still have to act in the world. And if you can't make judgments for yourself about acting in the world, you do what other people tell you, or you follow the leader, or you get a mishmash of opinions and you follow them, or you do what your mother tells you. Like Peter Keating. Why is Peter Keating a second-handed in the fountainhead? Is there an explanation? How deep do you want to go? He's second-handed because he doesn't trust his own mind, and he doesn't focus, and he doesn't use his own mind. Why doesn't he use his own mind? I don't know. Partially, because the incentive is in the world in which we live in today, with the kind of education we have today, which is what I said before, there's a disincentive to use your mind. There's a disincentive to think. If a kid, every time he asks a why question when they're 3 years old, gets slapped across the thing, every time he uses his mind to challenge the world, to see something new, to try to understand, is slapped and discouraged, then some of those kids are going to not think anymore. They're going to say this isn't worth the effort. Pain is going to stop them from doing it. Not all of them. Some of them will keep on. Some of them will, in spite of everything, keep on using their minds and be first-handed. Some of them will give up. But some kids, even when they're not slapped across, they just never develop that, or the educational system discourages it. Again, kindergarten and very early in life, these things happen. And some people just choose not to think, choose not to focus their mind on reality, and therefore by default are second-handed. That's the theory. So that's the reason, to the extent you should have a reason. Are most people today stupid and not worth engaging with? I don't think very many people are stupid. I think stupid is a silly word. What are we talking about? Yeah, some people are stupid. But most people are not. A lot of people are not stupid. A lot of people I disagree with. Most of the people I disagree with are not stupid. They're wrong. Some of them are evil. Many of them are evaders. And if somebody is an evader, i.e. evil, then there's no point talking to them. But if they're just stupid, they just have a low IQ, then sure, you can talk to them. There are lots of people with low IQ that you can point things out in reality. They get it. They change their mind. It's the people who evade. It's actually the smart people who there's no point engaging in, because they're the ones who are evading reality. They're the ones who are evading the facts. They're the ones who consciously, unconsciously are turning their backs to actual evidence. Right? What's the point in talking to somebody who believes in socialism, who's an adult, who's intelligent, who's smart, who's learned, who's studied? They know. They don't want to know, but they know. The knowledge is there. You're not going to say anything new to them that they've never heard before. Now, if they're young, if they're innocent, if they're still confused, if they're stupid, then you can talk to them. The standard is this. This is the standard for judging people. This is the standard for judging people in almost everything aspect of life. Is the person's orientation towards reality? His IQ doesn't matter. Is the person's orientation towards reality? If it's towards reality, you can talk to them. There's a lot to be gained. There's a real conversation to be had. If his orientation is towards anything else, his imagination, his theories, other people, then what are you going to tell him that's going to make any difference? What are you going to tell him that's going to make any difference? Even if you convince him, you'll just convince him to follow you instead of following somebody else, right? He'll just be a second-handed on you. So the only standard that matters is the person oriented towards reality, fact, truth. That's the standard. I know objectivists who are second-handed objectivists. And I know leftists who are oriented towards reality. And then it's our job to show them, help them see the truth. And most of them don't survive being a leftist for very long as a consequence. Is there any benefit to redefining compassion in a Buddhist sense, where it's not about altruism, but about training a happier disposition for yourself? I mean, maybe. I don't think of compassion as being altruistic, and I don't think it should be altruistic. So I definitely think we should redefine compassion as not being altruistic. But I also worry about Buddhism because I'm not sure Buddhism is truly about a happier disposition for yourself in a complete sense, in the sense of really understanding who yourself is. Because Buddhism undercuts the role of reason. Buddhism rejects the mind because the mind is too busy with the material world, too busy with the problems of survival, which were the only interesting problems we have. And therefore, Buddhism wants the mind to be obsessed with itself. So I don't think Buddhism is the solution. I do agree that redefining compassion and taking altruism out of compassion is a worthwhile endeavor. Would you consider stories like Harry Potter and other stories that are set in imagined metaphysical reality as having the potential to be art? Yeah, I think Harry Potter is art. It's definitely art. It's definitely a recreation of reality based on artist's metaphysical value judgment, which is Ayn Rand's definition of art. And I encourage you, in this 50th year anniversary of Romantic Manifesto, to go read a Romantic Manifesto. But yeah, I really enjoyed Harry Potter. It's a good story. It has certain things I don't like about it, like the final book is very Christian and the final scenes are very Christian. But it's dramatic. It's got heroes. It's fleshed out characters. You get to like certain characters. You get to hate certain characters because they're fleshed out. They have identities. The magic stuff is distracting and silly, and the boundaries on it are not clear, so it's hard to exactly understand what are the rules of the magic. Why can't Harry just go like that and have all the evil guys disappear? The same is true of any fantasy book. What are the boundaries of the magic? What are the rules of the magic? Is always a challenge for the writer to establish and yet allow them enough things to do at the same time. But I loved Harry Potter, and I definitely think it's art, and I think it's certainly for a teenage audience, it's good art. I think it's good art. It's romantic. Harry makes choices. All of them make choices, good choices, bad choices. The people who flip, the people who are evil and become good and become evil. And it's definitely good stuff, right? So I encourage people to read Harry Potter if they haven't read Harry Potter. Just because it's fantasy doesn't mean it's bad. And a lot of fantasy is good. I'm looking here. Okay, why is Florida ranked as the freest state? Is it? I didn't know that. Probably because it has no state income tax. It has probably less regulations. I mean, one of the problems in Texas, for example, is there's a lot of licensing laws, a lot of regulation of business that exists in Texas. I think Florida is the most, if it's true that it's ranked as the freest state, it's because of the low taxes and the generally pro-business or low level of regulation that exists in the state. And licensing laws comes to mind as something that state regulation is horrific and for example, would hold back Texas. Texas is not the freest state in the union. All right. How might I reconcile A, wanting to enjoy my life day to day in the short term, with B, wanting to save enough money to feel safe and secure? I did a whole thing on personal finance. You might want to go backwards and find it. I did a whole thing on personal finance, but you have to balance them out. You have to decide how important it is to save money, what you're saving money for, how much you value safety and security. Sometimes it's overvalued. Because how confident are you that you'll have a job in the future? How confident are you that you'll make more money in the future? And balance that with how much pleasure do you get out of spending money in the day to day? And I didn't start saving money. I didn't start saving money until my late 30s. Now, I'm a risk taker. I'm an optimistic person. I'm optimistic about my own capacity to make money, and I didn't think I needed to save before age 30, and it turned out to be right. I didn't need to save before age 30. Whatever I could have saved before age 30 was so minuscule, it would have made no difference in my life. I'm in a much better financial position today. Today I can afford to save a lot of money, so today I save a lot, so that one day I can not have to worry about money at all. And so it really depends on your character, on your values, on the weighting you put to safety and security, and what kind of career you're in. Are you afraid of your career? Are you worried about the future of your career? How confident are you in your own abilities to make a living? And if you don't feel comfortable in any of those things, then save. But also, if you don't feel comfortable in any of those things, invest in yourself to make yourself comfortable. I think it's really, really important to get yourself comfortable in those situations. To get yourself comfortable with risk. To get yourself comfortable with your career, to not be overly risk averse. I think it's really, really important. Are late abortions moral? Yes, I think they can be. They're not necessarily, but they can be. If the mother's life is endangered by continuing the pregnancy, if the fetus is deformed, if the fetus is going to have, some horrible disease, if the fetus is going to suffer, then absolutely it's moral. There are a variety of circumstances where it's moral. It certainly should be legal, but it can be immoral in the sense that the mother didn't bother really thinking about it. Oh, she's emotional, she changes her mind. Remember, to me, morality is about whether the decision is rational or not. And I can imagine late-term abortions being irrational. And I think in most of those cases, doctors wouldn't perform them. Doctors perform late-term abortion. Because their lives are at stake. So, good doctors at least. So, the whole issue of late-term abortions is for the most part a non-issue because there's so few late-term abortions. It's not a prevalent thing. Most people decide well before the final trimester, and when it is the final trimester, and there has to be a really good reason, and there often is a really good reason. Wow, somebody is really unleashing. All right, some of the alt-righters showed up on this chat. I guess, to go after Israel and to go after, I don't know, Congo drums or something? Let me just say this about culture, right? Culture is the achievements of the cultural achievements, the artistic achievements, the spiritual achievements of a people. And America's not being innovative in any aesthetic form. Now, again, somebody says, we make great music that influences us. No, we make lousy music that the whole world loves, and we have lowered the aesthetic standards of the whole world with our junk music. Now, some of it is okay, but most of it is just blah. And certainly if you compare it to classical music, to the great culture of the 19th century, we've had some decent novelists, and they sell very well around the world, but they don't compare to Hugo or Dostoevsky. A lot of, as I said yesterday, a lot of the scientists who made great achievements in the United States came from Europe. Now, there's a lot of science going on here, and I think the one area in which America has culture is the culture of business. It's the culture of entrepreneurship. It's the culture of innovation. That's the one area. But there's no great American culture when it comes to aesthetics. And again, that was Ayn Rand's view, and I'll get the quote from Ayn Rand for you next time because I know you guys like to hear it from an authority, not from me. All right, where did the Vine statue go that used to be behind me here? it went the way my wife likes it to be. She gets to make the aesthetic decisions in the house. And she puts it, we bought a bunch of new sculptures. So actually in the house, I actually just bought a sculpture, a beautiful sculpture online. A sculpture, the original is in Copenhagen. It's of a violinist, a female violinist. I think I posted some pictures of the original in marble on my Facebook page in the past. And I just bought a replica of it in bronze that was cast in the 19th century. And that'll join our sculpture collection in the house. So we have a lot of sculptures all over the condo in Puerto Rico, a lot of sculptures in the house in California. I love sculpture. My wife loves sculpture, but she gets to decide where the sculptures go, not me. She has the eye for what is beautiful. And as my kids used to say, she is the CEO of the house. She makes final decisions that related to anything domestic. All right. We're good. We did a lot of Super Chat questions today. Not very high-end Super Chat questions. There's dollar amounts, but still good ones. This was good. And, all the people who like to insult me came out. That's good. It's good. It's great to be in a country where we can talk about these things, and it's great to be a country where we can still talk about these things. It's great to be supported by people like you who make it possible for me to continue to talk about these things, because without you, I couldn't do it. I've given up millions, I said, to be able to talk about these things, but I do need to make a living, so please support me on the YaronBrookShow.com/support, on subscribestar.com/YaronBrookShow. Really appreciate every dollar that you guys provide in support of this show, in support of what I'm doing, is greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. What did I want to say? Yeah, I mean, I know there are people out there who think that I'm somehow anti-American, and let me tell you, I don't know that there's anybody out there who loves America more than I do, but I love America as it was intended to be, and I love America as it could be. I loved America, the Founding Fathers. I loved America that is possible if the Founding Fathers had a philosophical foundation for their beliefs, if liberty and freedom had a philosophical foundation. That's the America I believe in. Not Donald Trump's America, not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's America, and not an America of anything in between or anything even further out crazy nutty from there. I believe in America of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and George Washington, but a better America even than that, because all of those guys were flawed and none of them was a genius philosopher. I believe and I fight and I want an America with the best culture in the world, with a great culture, with a superior culture to anything human beings have ever seen in all of human history, right? But that kind of America can only exist when Ayn Rand's ideas are the dominant ideas in the culture. That kind of ideas can only exist when Ayn Rand's ideas shape how we think about the world, how we shape how we think about the world. And, it's going to be a long time before that happens. You should listen to a tape that Leonard Peikoff made. It's in the Ayn Rand East Store, or maybe it's on campus, but I think it's on the East Store. Why Greek culture is his favorite. Why Greek culture is his favorite. You guys don't understand what culture is. You don't know what it's like. You have no sense. Ayn Rand had that sense because Ayn Rand was born in the 19th century. She understood what the 19th century made possible. Right? Made possible. What it was. What sense of life, what sense of the world, what passion, what art, what beauty, what emphasis on life that period in history had. And that period in history, those ideas were all produced by European artists, European thinkers, European creators. And that was the great, and to Leonard, the greatest culture was the culture of Greece. You could argue that the greatest culture was the culture of the Enlightenment, the culture of the 18th century, the culture that really created or made possible the founding of this country and the founders of America. Or you could argue the 19th century with Hugo and Chopin and the great academic painters of France and England and other places. You could argue any of those cultures were the best cultures in human history. But culture is something that goes beyond, way beyond politics. Culture is something that goes way beyond the material. Greece, they were dirt poor, no running water, no electricity. Yet they had a great culture, according to Leonard Peikoff, maybe the greatest culture ever. Right? And until you get, you gotta appreciate those things. And one of the things that we're so poor in America, so poor in today, is culture, are the spiritual values that don't exist anymore. I know Ayn Rand was born in 1905, but everything before World War I is still considered 19th century cultural wise. But you're poor. We are unbelievably poor. We don't even know how poor we are when it comes to culture, when it comes to art, when it comes to aesthetics, when it comes to beauty. Right. You have no idea. You have no idea. All right. Thanks, everybody. I encourage you all to come to OCON 2019, where we'll be talking a lot about the Romantic Manifesto, about what culture really looks like, it can look like. I appreciate all of you listening. Some of you I don't appreciate. Those of you who are just there on the chat in order to call me names don't particularly appreciate you. You're all a bunch of losers. This is how you spend your time. Jason asks, how have you run into a lot of anti-Semitism in your life career? Not a lot, but I've run into it. I'd say I ran into it to Santa Clara with the Jesuits. The Jesuits certainly didn't want me in their department, partially because I was Jewish and there were too many Jews in the finance department. Shocking, isn't it? Once in a while you run into people who say really weird things about Jews, and you realize, yeah, these people are really anti-Semitic. When I hitchhiked across the United States, that's a story I'll tell you one day. When I was 18, I hitchhiked across the United States from California to New Orleans, and from New Orleans to Washington, D.C. I encountered a lot of anti-Semites, a lot of weird people, a lot of strangeness. That was in 1979. I stuck my thumb out on I-5. No, I-10, right? And hitchhiked. That was interesting. A lot of crazy stories from that period. Not recommended to anybody, but that is part of my life. So yeah, I run into it. I wouldn't say a lot of it. Oh, the time I ran into the most anti-Semitic comments, the most anti-Semitism I've ever seen, is when I did a show a couple of years ago on the alt-right. Oh my God, you should have seen what happened. Oh my God, what I saw on Twitter was unbelievable. In terms of the anti-Semitic, vile, disgusting nature of the tweets that I was sent back then, right? When you speak about the alt-right, spooky, horrible weirdos. Some of them are here right now, and they are. Many of them are disgusting anti-Semites. One of the reasons I won't debate, somebody asked me about debating those guys, I won't debate them is exactly because of that. I've never seen anything as vile as those anti-Semitic, alt-right crazies who came after me afterwards. Now, it's true, there's a lot of anti-Semitism on the left. It's more polite and disguised on the left because they're not supposed to be anti-Semitic. The alt-right, there's just no holds bar. But a lot of the anti-Israel sentiment you see on the left is basically disguised anti-Semitism. But on the alt-right, there's just no shame in it. And of course, you see the anti-Semitic, the anti-Semitism also. And what's her name? That Muslim congresswoman. Certainly, you see it in the Muslim world in some of the most vile places. But in terms of personally, what I've experienced it far more on the alt-right than I have on the left. And Jason, for that final statement, you're a racist SOB. I mean, you're nothing but a low-life racist. So leave my show alone. Why are you wasting your time listening to me? I piss you off. I guess you enjoy pissing me off, but you're a complete nutcase. And an absolute, unequivocal racist. So, so be it. All right, guys. It's been fun in spite of the jokes on some of these things, and I apologize for those of you listening on a podcast or not seeing, those of you not listening live and watching this. But it's been a blast. We covered a lot of material today. I'm sure we'll turn a bunch of this into short videos, and I will talk to you all. I don't know when, because I'm going on this trip. I'll be in Arkansas tomorrow. I'm giving 2 talks in Arkansas. I'll be at Purdue University on Thursday. If you're anywhere near Purdue, come to Purdue. Purdue is it's going to be an amazing talk. Young Americans for Liberty are hosting me in Purdue, and thank you, Jennifer, for making that possible. And I will be in Colorado, in Denver on Friday. I will then be talking in 2 talks, one in Philadelphia and one in Lafayette in Purdue. I said Purdue, right? In Lafayette, in Pennsylvania. On Tuesday, I will then be I'll be speaking at Utah, at Brigham Young University. On Wednesday, I will be speaking at Berkeley. Yeah, I'll be speaking at Berkeley. This is quite a tour. I'm doing Berkeley, Brigham Young, Lafayette, which is a liberal arts college. I'm doing, Arkansas, University of Arkansas. I'm all over the place, all over the country. And finally, I end the whole thing up by speaking for the Federalist Society at the Arizona State University, at the Federalist Society annual student gathering in Arizona. And I'll be speaking on a panel there about basically, should the state intervene in economics? Legal issues related to that. I'm going to be the one economist on the panel. They're all going to talk constitutional law. But anyway, all right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the support. For those of you who chose to use Superchat, thank you for the support. For those of you who are supporting the show on the YaronBrookShow.com/support or on subscribestar.com, or even those of you who are still on Patreon.com/YaronBrookShow. All of you, thank you. Have a great night, and I will talk to you very, very soon from somewhere around the United States.